everyone. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. We are going to get started. Welcome to our November community gathering. I'm Ellie Hayland, president of Humanist MN. I welcome any new visitors and also longtime members. We're so happy to have you all here. For any new members or visitors, I always like to do a quick crash course on humanism. We're a secular community for ethical living. We're committed to the well-being of all and sustainability of the planet. We're a home for those looking for a community of naturally curious, compassionate, and rational people. So in short, we believe you can be good without a God. HMN is a very active organization. We organize primarily through Meetup, so join us there to see all of our upcoming events, of which there are many. We are an all-volunteer nonprofit. We depend on the service and generosity of our members and friends to further our mission. We have many volunteer opportunities such as marketing, media and tech, membership, programming, and social action. Please reach out to me or Audrey Kingstrom, who you're going to hear from in a minute, and we'll be in the lobby after the program if you want to chat about getting involved. You can also go to our website at humanistmn.org to learn more about us or explore opportunities to get involved, and there you can also support us by becoming a dues-paying member. A little bit of housekeeping. Restrooms are out the door and to the left, or downstairs and also to the left. After the speaker and Q&A session, we have a social hour in the lobby at 4:30. We encourage you to stay and socialize. We will be providing food and drinks, and we encourage you to please consider contributing with a donation to help us cover our costs. One last note, this is being live streamed, and that video will be posted permanently on YouTube, and there may be photography, so just a heads up about the photo and video component of today. And up next is Audrey Kingstrom, our programming coordinator.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you here today. Next month, this is part of it's the second Saturday. Usually the third Saturday is part of our speaker series, but to accommodate our speaker today, we are having this event on the second Saturday. Next month, though, because of the holidays, we are not going to be here and we're not having a speaker. We are having our winter solstice celebration. And it will be happening, though, still the third Saturday, December 16th, but we will be over in St. Paul at the lovely Humanities Center for our winter solstice event, and it will be at 5 o'clock in the afternoon instead of 3 o'clock here. But one of the things about our celebration, we'll have a lovely dinner together. We'll do some secular caroling together, but then we're going to have sort of a variety show, which will be us, or some of us, not all of us, there will not be time. But I want to, just this past week, I posted on Meetup an invitation looking for creative people, poetry readers, poetry writers, musicians, storytellers, magicians, whatever. It's us, and I want to, this is not a professional, this is a variety show. This is not a professional show. This is to bring good cheer to each other on a probably what we expect to be a dark, cold night. So please join us. The meetup, though, is scheduled for Tuesday, November 28th, and we will be on Zoom. So if you have an idea of what you'd like to do, sort of write it up, come and share your idea online with us, and sort of submit your idea. We can talk about it a little bit, or I even have some things in my collection. If you're going like, I'd like to read something, I could probably find something for you. If you can't come that evening, contact me or Mitch, who is my co-host in the back. Raise your hand. He's back in the video booth there. You can email one of us or contact us through the Meetup. You can do that through Meetup, and let us know, and we'll be in touch with you. But we really want to encourage you. Please step up and share your passion, your talent, your time for the holidays. Thank you. Oh, yes, I always forget. And Suzanne is up next to introduce our speaker for the day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Suzanne Perry. I'm on the board of Humanists MN, and I'm very excited to be able to introduce our speaker today, Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. Keith was sworn in as Attorney General in January 2019, and the following year had to help manage one of the most troubling incidents in Minnesota history, the murder of George Floyd. At the request of Governor Walz, Attorney General Ellison took over the prosecution of Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin for that murder. In his new book, Break the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence, he describes his team's successful effort to bring justice to Floyd and his family. He also explores the bigger question of how we can end the pattern of police brutality against Black people in this country. A bit more about Keith's background. He's the first African American and the first Muslim to be elected to statewide office in Minnesota. Before running for Attorney General, he served in the U.S. Congress representing the 5th Congressional District. He served in the Minnesota legislature, and he worked as a civil rights and defense attorney. Just a note about the format. After Keith's presentation, we'll have a question and answer period. The microphone is right there, so as soon as Keith is wrapping up, if you'd like to answer a question, please line up there. And as Ellie mentioned, there will be a social hour after that, and Keith's book will be for sale. He'll be signing them right out those doors and to the left. And I highly recommend the book. I actually went to a different book signing that Keith had and bought the book and read it, and it's really compelling, especially for Minnesotans to learn more about what happened in our own backyard. Okay, now please welcome Keith Ellison.
Suzanne, thanks for that very generous and kind introduction. You know, friends, the most compelling place to start for me is when I saw the video at 4:45 a.m. on the 25th of May, 2020. And after I watched that video and I saw the man desperately crying out to breathe for his mother, for some basic human decency, then I began to notice that his pleas stretched out, got more space in between them, and then they fell. And even though he was at one point unresponsive, and the pleas of the people who were on the corner began to rise, get off of him, check his pulse, that still no change occurred. Nobody did anything different. Nobody took any different action. They did, in fact, take his pulse. J. Alexander King did take his pulse. But what we got back and what those bystanders got back was, hey, look, if he can talk, he can breathe. And then when he stopped breathing, one young 17-year-old woman said, he's not breathing now. And you can hear it audibly on the tape. You know, those young people on that tape that you can hear, they were not just an exclusive group of young people. We had people there who were 61, some people were in their 30s, some people were in their late 20s. And then, of course, you had 3 teenagers. You had Darnella Frazier, Melissa Funari, and Melissa Gilbert. And then you had 9-year-old Judea Reynolds. And here's the thing, friends, none of them knew George Floyd, not a one. They had never met him. He was just a person on the ground. They had every reason to wonder whether or not he had done something to get himself put in that position. But they did not have time to judge him. They only had time to try to save him. And that is what they set about doing. So they did raise their voices. And when their voices were unheeded, they whipped out these little pocket-sized computers and began to take video. And then they posted, Darnella Frazier posted her video online and came to court a year later to testify about what she saw. And even though it was a year later, these people who didn't know George Floyd, none of them got up on the stand and got off the stand without tears. It was a multiracial group that stood up for George Floyd on that corner. They were black, they were white, they were male, they were female, they were young, they were not so young, they were children, they were teenagers. But they were unified in the effort to try to protect and serve human life. And you can contrast that to the people who actually killed George Floyd, because they were a multiracial group too, friends. J. Alexander King is mixed race, but he identifies as black. Tu Tao, clearly Hmong, and two white guys. They were a multiracial group. They were trained. They had gone to the academy. They knew what they were supposed to do. And I know many of you might wonder, well, what is their training? And maybe today we'll talk about training. But I'm here to tell you that you're not going to find a whole lot of fertile ground to change around our training protocol. The training's not really the problem. Following the training, we find is the problem. And so, I hope to engage this conversation, because here's the thing. Here's why I want to talk to you about the people on the corner who didn't know George Floyd, because they are exactly like us here in this room today. Randomly selected by fate, called upon to pass a moral test, which they passed. They could have said nothing. They could have said, he's probably up to no good anyway. I'm sure if the police got him down on the ground like that, he did something to deserve it. Look how big he is. What are they supposed to do with these people? Don't you know we're in the Bloods neighborhood over here? They did none of that. They did not take time to judge him. All they could see is his humanity, and they stepped forward to try to do something to save him. These randomly selected people without PhDs or even college degrees. Maybe one had a college degree. Maybe Genevieve Hansen, who was a firefighter, trained paramedic, had some, highest post-secondary education. But everybody else was very regular working class folks. Some of them were too young to do much more than go to the 3rd or 4th grade. But if 9-year-old Judea Reynolds knew that what she saw was wrong, why then did the officers who went through the academy, went through the training protocols, 19 years on the force is what Derek Chauvin had, how come he did not know? The academy is not designed to make you dumber. What is it that 9-year-old, that was obvious to a 9-year-old, but that 37-year-old could not see, 42-year-old could not see? Well, the difference was clear. That once you get out of the academy, there is a clear message that you won't find written anywhere. And what is that message? All that stuff they teach you in the academy is real nice, but this is how we do policing around here. If you want to succeed, you better get it with the program. Never forget, Derek Chauvin was the field training officer for J. Alexander King. Some of you might think, well, Keith, why'd you charge the other 3? It's a good question. 2 of them were rookies. You might think, well, can you really hold them accountable? And my answer is, under the law, they aided and abetted the unlawful and illegal killing of George Floyd. And they did know better. And if you doubt it, they pled guilty. So they knew better. What was going on is what goes on in every city in America, and even a lot of rural places, is we have 2 things going on when it comes to policing. One of them is extremely legitimate and important. One of those things is to protect and serve and enforce the law, maintain order in our community, offer protection to people who need it, be there to collect statements, to prevent crime, and to help people live safe, ordered lives. And that is perfectly legitimate, and we have got to all band together and support them in that endeavor for our own sake. But then there's this other arm too, and that is the historical reality that in our nation, police have been used to maintain social order. They have been used to, I mean, here's an example. Have you ever heard of the Stonewall Rebellion in New York? That didn't have nothing to do with black people, really, but it did have everything to do with excessive force by police against gay community in New York. That's the origin of it. You know, the first police departments that we could find on record inside the United States were in South Carolina and in New York and in Boston. And the ones in New York and in Boston really grew up because you had European immigrants who were demanding better wages, and they were brought in to suppress those labor struggles. And in South Carolina, I don't have to tell you what they were for. They were there to suppress, to monitor slaves, monitor enslaved people who, because nobody, you know, we have to remember our country for 250 years was a slaveholding society, which meant that, you know, even walking down the street, you had to have a pass for that. People, anyone at all could stop you and say, "Where is your pass?" People like you don't get to just walk around. Show me that your master allowed you to do that. This is our nation, 250 years. How many, 20 years is a generation, how many 20-year periods are in that 200, are between 1619 and 1865? A few, huh? But it didn't end there. From, I don't know, 1865 to 1968, we lived in something other than a multiracial democracy. In order to have that kind of social organization, you've got to have people who police it, or it won't last. And by the way, ever since 1968, when we passed the Fair Housing Act, which is where I marked the end of Jim Crow, we've had disparities in every single aspect of American life. Some most intense in our own beloved Twin Cities, as we look at education disparities and health disparities and income disparities and things like that. If you have a group of Homo sapien sapien human beings, you cannot turn them into whip dogs just by oppressing them. They will always not go with it. They're never going to. And it doesn't matter how long they're put under that. And so because people won't submit to that, you're going to have to police it, and you're going to have to use more than just police. You're going to have to use segregation in housing, racially restrictive covenants, which we have tons of around here. You know that. If you ever want to learn more about it, look up something called Jim Crow Up North. It's a film. Does anybody ever heard of it? Yeah. Would you all agree that it's definitely worth your time to study? Yeah. And basically, it just says that, you know, the FHA, Federal Housing Administration, the government, us, said that if you want us to insure these mortgages, because mortgages sometimes default, then the mortgages have to be based on restrictive covenants on the deeds. And so in the deeds, and many people in Minneapolis, you read those old deeds associated with the house, it says only people of the Caucasian race can live here. No Jews, no blacks, unless they're living here as servants, then they could live there. And they're all over the place. They're easy to find. Go to the Hennepin Museum, you'll see as many of them as you ever want to see. And so policing, housing segregation, education, these are the ways you maintain a system of racialized subordination if you're not going to have Jim Crow. You got to use other systems, and they work pretty well. And so the policing ends up being the sharp edge of what is a larger system of disadvantaging some and advantaging others. None of us came up with it. It's nobody's fault. We all inherited it. But I do think we all have a responsibility to do something about it if we aspire to be members of a multiracial democracy. Let me finish up by just saying this. There is every reason in the world, far more than just moral reasons, and I don't want to discount moral reasons. I think moral reasons are the best reasons. But we don't just have moral reasons to change this situation, to literally break the wheel, which is the title of my book, right? Did you know, and you probably did know, or maybe you didn't, but if you didn't, I'm here to tell you, that our Minneapolis, between 2003 and 2020, spent more than $100 million in police misconduct cases. $100 million. Do we have $100 million to just throw away on police misconduct cases? Wouldn't it be cheaper if we just stopped the misconduct? I mean, there's people living in tents in our city, which is the coldest, is the most northern big city in America. And you know, all of us know that if we can make it past Halloween without a freeze, then that's pretty good. But yet we have people living in tents. We got $100 million to throw away? Or what about streetlights? What about potholes? What about so many things? We don't. This is, I think, like the 15th wealthiest major metropolitan area in the United States. But even with that wealth, we still don't have it to throw around like that. Not just $100 million, we also probably spent $500 million on civil unrest that we saw during 2020. But we're not alone. New York, has spent out, far more than Minnesota in the area of civil unrest payments and in terms of civil rights cases. In Chicago, 2018, they spent about $175 million in police misconduct cases. And if you know anything about police misconduct in Chicago, boy, there is a scary story to tell. Anybody ever heard of John Burge? This is the guy who used to extract confessions with cattle prod to the genitals. He went to prison for it, but he got away with it for decades before he ever got caught. Because the people who you did it to, they were deemed to be not worthy of belief. So we're paying massive civil rights lawsuits. We're paying for the civil unrest that routinely happens where you allow an unjust condition go on. People will, you don't have to say it's right, or you don't have to say it's wrong, but it will, in fact, it is predictable that you will have riots if you let this condition go on long enough. And then there's something else. There's a third thing I want to bring to your attention. Did you know that the city of St. Paul has a homicide clearance rate of about 90%? That means if you kill somebody in St. Paul, there's 9 out of 10 chances that they're going to figure out who did it. Do you know what it is in our town? It's about 30%. Some 38%. We'll give, you know what? We'll round up 40%. What accounts for the difference? There's nothing but a river standing between us. Trust. Somebody heard this hollering in the alley last night. Somebody knows who did what. People know this one is beefing with that one. People know what's going on. But if the people don't trust you or like you or fear your response as much as they fear criminals, they won't call you. Imagine, if you will, Judea Reynolds, 9 years old, at 19, maybe 29, maybe 39, 29, she's a mom. She hears something disturbing and scary around the corner. Ordinarily, she'd call 911, but now she pauses because she's like, are these people going to help or are they going to hurt? I don't know. If it gets bad enough, I'll call, but if it's just kind of bad, maybe I won't. Think about Justine Rushtet. All she did, she actually made the call. 911, because she thought there was a woman in distress outside. She is the one who called. She goes out there in her bathrobe and gets shot and killed by a police officer. Don't be afraid to demand higher standards. It's okay if you and I ask for higher standards. If we demand higher standards, we will pay out less in civil rights cases. We will avoid the riots that are always accompany a systemic system of unfairness. We will improve trust between police and community. We will solve more crimes. And we'll make progress when it comes to recruitment too. Imagine being 23 years old, you want to be a police, you don't want to do a desk job. Policing seems like it would be good. You like to help people. You like to move around. You like to be on your feet. You don't want to just push paper. Hey, maybe I'll be a police officer. But you have to imagine, what if you have to be somebody like Derek Chauvin's partner, who when they get a call, they arrive on the scene, they jump out of the car, and they're calling everybody a sack of so-and-sos and worse, and looking for a fight as opposed to trying to solve a problem. I can tell you, as a defense attorney of 20 years and a prosecutor of the last 5, there are some amazing human beings on our police department. They really are high quality and good people. But we have an organization. And think about this. In most organizations, you have 10% of the people who will do the right thing even if nobody's looking. They don't do the right thing because they're going to get caught. They do the right thing because it is the right thing. 10%, they don't do the right thing unless they think they're going to get trouble if they don't. You all have jobs, you have neighborhoods, you have families, people. There's a certain group that's like, they bear watching. Am I right? No? I'm the only one who's been through that? Okay. And then most people are in the big mushy middle. Now, if the do-right people are getting promoted and being lifted up in leadership and being honored, then the culture of the mushy middle is going to incline their direction. But if the racists and the bullies and the crooks and the questionable morality folks over here, if they seem to be running the show, the culture of the organization shifts over here. Let me give you a little story, and then I'll wrap up. Susan said I used to be in Congress. Anybody remember me as a congressperson? There you go. I used to be in that job. In 2006, you all elected me to represent you in the United States Congress. And you'll never hear me go on and on how I was the first this or the first that. I didn't run to be the first of anything. I just ran to serve my community. But I was. And so, we marked the moment because it had an element of history to it. Anyway, meanwhile, in Minneapolis, there was a meeting of nobody but cops in the room, as there often is. It was and there was it was a training of some kind. Bob Kroll, who was not yet head of the union, is talking to a group of only cops. And he says to them, the people of Minneapolis are pretty dumb. They're pretty dumb. We're at war with the terrorists, and they just elected one of them to Congress. A young woman stands up in the back and puts her hand up and says, are you saying Congressman Ellison is a terrorist because of his religion? And he says, he is one of them. And then he says, but you're taking me out of context. I didn't say it, and if I did say it, I didn't mean it. And if I did say it, I was only kidding, but I didn't say it anyway. You can imagine how fast his feet were moving once he thought somebody was holding him accountable. Well, it turns out that there's an investigation. RT says, well, you say she says you said it. You say you didn't. Let's start getting some statements in here. Well, it came down that he did say it, and Chief Dolan, if you remember him, has to issue a public apology to me. So he sure said it. Now, I'm no way in the world scared of some bully like that guy. No way in the world. This guy does not keep me up at night at all. I know who he is and I know what he is. But what if I was a 17-year-old Somali kid? That might be a little different. I guess what I'm trying to say to you is we can do better and we must. But just like those people on the corner who all they saw was someone in need, we have to respond that way. We have to be the ones who say, it's not a choice between safety or you let the cops do whatever they want. It's not like we have to tolerate police brutality or we won't be safe. That is not true. Don't let anyone ever tell you that. It is not true. I argue to you, and I'm submitting to you that in fact, it is the existence of this police brutality problem that diminishes the level of safety in our city. Not exclusively and not only. There are other problems. We can talk about those too. But I'm telling you that if you want to recruit good people, if you want to build trust, you've got to have higher standards. And my father, 95 years young, loves to say, you know, son, it's just as good to see a bad one go as to see a good one come. You can do addition by subtraction. Getting rid of people who don't supposed to be on the police force is not going to kill them. But if you let them stay there and they kill somebody, they might end up doing 22 and a half years in prison, which is exactly what Derek Chauvin is doing right now. Derek Chauvin would have been better off if after his 5th excessive force case, somebody would have pulled him in the office and said, you're having a problem. What's going on with you? After his 7th one, to say, you know what, we're going to start really documenting this. After his 12th one, you could have said, you know, we're going to fire you if you keep it up. And when he got his 13th one, you know, that's it, man. You know, you can wash windows, you can sell insurance, do anything you want. You can you can hang drywall, but you can't be a Minneapolis police officer. If that would have happened to him, he'd have been mad and he'd have been upset, and the union would have been, oh my God, can you see what they did to our boy? But he wouldn't have been free right now. It's not the worst thing to happen that somebody get fired from a job. There are other opportunities out there. Not everybody's suited to do police work. To be a police officer, you got to be particularly patient, particularly immune from having an emotional reaction when somebody talks to you in a way you don't appreciate. To be a police officer, you got to be courageous in dangerous situations. And if you are prone to flying off the handle to vindicate your honor, maybe this is not the job for you. So friends, I'm so honored to be here with you all today. I hope we can have a little bit of dialogue. I could read from the book, but I don't think I need to. But if you want me to, I certainly would do it. But the main thing I want you to do, and I want you to be like 9-year-old Judea Reynolds. I want you to be like 17-year-old Darnella Frazier. I want you to care even if you don't know the person, and put some skin in the game and make a change and make a difference, because we certainly can. Hey, look, in our conversation, we don't need to stay on this topic. We can talk about anything you want. So that's all I got for you today. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ellison. I would like to hear something from your book, if you don't mind, because we've got a bit of extra time.
Well, you know what? Let's do it. Do y'all mind if this podium has got me separated from you. Is it okay if I just sit here? Can I borrow your book? I will. Signatures are free. Shortly after Governor Walz assigned me the case in June 2020, I was in Detroit visiting my 94-year-old father, Leonard Ellison, and my two older brothers, Leonard Jr. and Brian. Brian is an ordained minister and a pastor. He picked me up from the airport, and as we often do, we stopped for a little lunch at the Big Boy chain, a local chain in Michigan. After we made small talk with the hostess, a teenager wearing a COVID mask with rhinestones on it, Brian asked me to tell him what I could about the case. There was a lot I couldn't share, but there were some things that I could. As we were sitting in the booth of the restaurant, Brian held his chin, contemplating something. He said, "You say none of them knew him, huh?" Referring to the witnesses and Floyd. "Nope, none of them knew him," I said, munching on some French fries. "So why did they start yelling at the cops to stop?" Brian asked. "They thought it was the right thing to do, I guess," I said. "So they stepped forward to protest what was happening to someone they didn't know, someone they could have assumed the worst about, and took video of the cops as the cops were on top of him like that?" "Yep." "Wow. They could have been arrested or beaten themselves." "Yeah, I suppose. Some cops still might retaliate. Ain't unheard of, you know." "Yeah, true." Then Brian said, "It's a modern reenactment of the story of the Good Samaritans." I paused. "Huh? What do you mean, Rev?" "You can't understand the story of the Good Samaritans," said Preacher Brian, "unless you understand that the Jews and the Samaritans considered each other heretics at the time. Both groups recognized Abraham as their father, but they had different beliefs which led to conflict, including violence, destruction of holy sites, and more." Brian went on, "You can't understand the story without understanding that the injured man on the roadside and the Samaritan were in conflicting groups." I started to pick up what Brian was laying down. He went on, "So, as you know, a Samaritan saw an injured man lying on the roadside. Two men walked past the injured man. One was a priest and the other was a Levite, both learned and moral men, trained in religion and law. Neither one of them helped. They had their reasons, but they didn't help. The Samaritan helped. He dressed the man's wounds, loaded him on the back of his donkey, and delivered the injured man to an inn. When he reached the inn, the Samaritan paid the innkeeper for the night and asked him to check on the injured man throughout the night. The Samaritan promised to reimburse the innkeeper for any extra expenses when he returned." Brian repeated his point. What these people, these bystanders did, it's the story of the Good Samaritan. George Floyd, in the eyes of some people in this world, is the ultimate other, Brian said. Brian was right about this. Not more than a few days after Floyd's death, a well-known pundit, Candace Owens, tweeted a harsh denunciation for the deceased George Floyd, which went viral. She said, "We've turned George Floyd, a criminal drug addict, into an icon." She wasn't alone. A chorus of critics illuminated Floyd's mistakes, his addiction to justify what Chauvin did to him, and to protect the status quo. Brian went on, "In the eyes of some, he's nothing but a big black thug with a drug problem who tried to cheat the store with a fake bill. He's the ultimate other who is outside the circle of our compassion. But like the Samaritan, the bystanders never judged him. They did what they could to help him. They witnessed his martyrdom, and they tried to help." Brian took another fry and thoughtfully continued. He said that Chauvin, Lane, and King and Tao were like the Levite and the priest. They had a duty, they had a training, and they had the ability to help the suffering man, but they didn't help. They caused the suffering. It was their job to protect Floyd, especially if he was on drugs, but they did nothing. Frankly, they did worse than nothing. Yeah, man, I see what you're saying. The Samaritan didn't ask the injured man whether he had a criminal record or whether he had been drinking alcohol or taking dope. Brian took a sip of coffee. The Samaritan asked whether the injured man needed help, and that's all he needed to know. According to something called the bystander effect, Brian said, what these people did was truly extraordinary. The Reverend, my brother, said, "That's a miracle." What some people call a miracle, well, here's the miracle: an amazing spiritual event. And it happened right there on video for the world to see. I thought about it. Months after talking with Brian, but well before the trial, I proposed to our team that our case was really all about what the bystanders saw. I don't think I told them that Brian sparked the idea, but I told them that the testimony of the use of force case with the officers, the police trainers, and the experts was to confirm for the jury what the bystanders witnessed: unreasonable force. The testimony of the medical causation witnesses was really about confirming for the jury what the bystanders had witnessed too: unreasonable force substantially caused the death of George Floyd. If we prove these things, we would prove unintentional second-degree murder. All the prosecution had to do was to convince the jurors to be like the bystanders on 38th in Chicago. So there's a lot to talk about, folks. We got 2 consent decrees cooking. Those things are working their way out. My office represents the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, so we're their lawyers, so we're working on that part of it too. And then the feds are working on theirs as well. There's a lot happening. I can tell you that that you might be curious about, well, do these things work? How expensive are they? Will they yield better results? What about when they leave? Are we just going to go back to where we were before? These are all good questions, and I don't know if you want to ask them or not, but I'll leave that to you.
Just a few Q&A guidelines so that everyone who wants to ask a question can. Keep it to questions, not comments, and try to avoid compound questions. Be brief. Thank you.
I'm going to make 2 brief comments anyway. Dare I?
There's always one.
I
Or
won't-
2.
I won't be the only. Mr. Ellison, thank you so much. I am a Minneapolis resident. I voted for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I marched in the first protest on this
Thank you.
case.
Thank you for that.
So keenly interested. And what I want to say is that you're highlighting how folks responded and what they saw. To me, is one of the key elements of humanism. It's about responding to each of our humanity and taking care of each other, because all these things are the same across us.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you with this case, applying your extensive skills to elevating, completing the prosecution and elevating that there's a systemic issue, and that beginning to create, as you say, public safety includes, yes, at times enforcement and enforcement of rules, yes. And there's also, it began to open the space for other responses than somebody with a gun on their hip, like behavioral health response.
Yep.
So we need that. So, but I will go to my question, which does relate to what you just last said. It's occurring to my mind, what do you recommend can be done? What do you think can be done? I know about electing city council folks or mayors, et cetera. What do you think will play out from your position and your level, and what can your office do? Thank you.
Thanks. Great. First of all, I agree with both your points. I think you're right. I'm going to try to make this quick. One of the things that we can do, first of all, I think there's a lot of things we can do, but all the training and all the this and all the that and all the stuff we hear about, all the dual responses, all that is premised on one thing, and that is that the officers live up to their training. And the only way to do that is to enforce the rules when they don't. So you've got to have 2 things. Criminal conduct must be prosecuted. We cannot exist in a dual system of justice, whereas if an officer does it, we're not gonna prosecute the case. I caught a lot of flack for prosecuting Kim Potter. A lot of people were mad at me. Well, it was a mistake, it was an accident, accidents happen. I'm like, yeah. And if anybody in this room right now was texting and driving and hit somebody and killed them, it would be an accident, and you all would be in trouble for it. In fact, she worked with that taser for 19 years and worked with that Glock for 26 years and did exactly what she was trained not to do and kill someone. So we're supposed to look past it because she's a good person? Because I think she is a good person. I really do think Kim Potter's a good person. But still, that doesn't mean she gets to walk away from this, right? So we got to enforce the law equally. The other thing is administrative challenges. Because if all you're doing is prosecuting crime, there's a whole lot of bad conduct before you get to a crime. Like if all we're doing is saying, okay, don't do a crime. Well, that's like the least you can do is not commit a crime, you know. I think that you've got to use administrative remedies to much more extensively than we do now. So like we had like prior excessive force complaints that were like 400 days old, which is unfair to the officer and the complainant. So you got to be done faster. And then if it's found that you did this, then you're going to have to deal. And there's got to be more discipline. And then I think we need to change the police. I mean, I hope that Jacob in the council bargain a lot tougher on the collective bargaining agreement. And I'm a union person. I believe in unions. I love unions. There's almost nothing about a union that I don't like, except for police unions. And so those are a few thoughts that we can do and that the AG can help too. We also, on the other side, can help go, so like a lot, why do the cops end up in these situations? Well, sometimes they shouldn't even be there. So we need to drive this conversation. Do we need 4 armed men for a bad 20? Right? Do we really need 4 armed men for a bad 20? George Floyd was not giving nobody any problems. He was answering the questions, right? They asked him what his name was. He told them. They said, spell it. He spelled it. They asked him where he lived. He gave them his address. What is the problem here? You know? So, I mean, if we had dual response for mental health, if we had people who just did like property stuff, if we use more cameras for police stops, we could do a lot to reduce the negative, the contacts that so often result in unfortunate, sometimes even tragic situations. Yes, sir.
Something I'm sure all of us have seen over the years is where there's police misconduct, administration tries to discipline them, and they end up in a mediation or arbitration. I don't know what the technical word is. Arbitration. And my first question is this the result of the collective bargaining agreements, or are there statutory requirements? And secondly, what can we do to deal with that problem? It seems like people get away, you know, they'll be fired, and then the arbitrator will reinstate them. They get back pay, they get their job back. We're right back to square one. How do we deal with that?
Well, we do need better collective bargaining agreements. I mean, the collective bargaining agreement should be here. We're talking about your pay, we're talking about job safety, and we're talking about your pension, and you're talking about health care. The chief's gonna run the department, sorry. We need to draw a much harder line right there. And by the way, we got some things in our charter that do even restrict the chief from doing a lot of things. I'll just say that. So absolutely it's that. But then also, Bob, sometimes that's a cop-out too, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because if you have excessive force problems, you know, so you get a complaint. The officer called me a foul name and smacked me in the head, and I wasn't doing anything. He said, assume the position, need me on the butt, and call me a name. I wasn't even doing anything. So I'm filing a complaint. Well, if we find that the officer did it, but then there's no discipline, and then another one happened, then another case like that happens, but it was on tape and a lot of people saw it, now it's in the news. Now we want to say, okay, we're really going to respond, it's going to fire this officer. The arbitrator is going to say, hold on, wait a minute. You cannot go from 0 to 60 because you're in the news and you're embarrassed. So all of you who work in, corporate America or in, you have to apply an even standard of discipline. And so like there's this case before the Minnesota Supreme Court where the officer had been abusing confined people in cuffs, beating on them, smashing on them, bam, bam. And the chief in Richfield said, you're disciplined. Then he does it again, and then he fires him. This is a Richfield case. Mm-hmm. The Supreme Court says, well, you know what? You all agreed to handle these problems with collective bargaining, and this has been the way you've been handling these things. You haven't been firing people for this, so you can't just suddenly fire this guy for this. And I thought it was an unfortunate decision, but I did understand the reasoning. We've got to do both things that you said. One, we've got to have more discretionary latitude with the chief, and the chiefs all throughout the state have got to say excessive force complaints, even when they're non-lethal. They've got to bring some sort of meaningful discipline, because when you do one of them do discipline, then you can't do it because you haven't been doing it. Mm-hmm. And the arbitrator is going to say this is unfair. But there have been some changes to the arbitration system too. So I'm hoping that those things work. But I think you're focused on the right problem.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Hey, David.
Hello. Thank you for the talk. Maybe this is an odd question, but I understand that criminals need punished, police need to be disciplined, but I feel as you're talking, I feel like one of the things that is often overlooked is the idea of keeping humanity with everybody involved. Like, yes, a person committed a crime, but most criminals are not necessarily what I describe evil, and we sometimes seem to forget that. How could we encourage people to how can we encourage a system that remind everybody yet yes, he did something bad, but does not mean he needs to be treated like an animal, because again, like most people are not going to go out and just commit serial killing everywhere.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think you're right.
Okay.
No, was there something you wanted me to respond to?
No, that's the question. How could we encourage a system to keep how can we create a system where this is encouraged? Like, again, you can't catch everything, but how can we make sure that this ideal is upheld, basically? So.
Yeah, I think we got to enforce the law equally, and so there's this idea called impunity. Y'all familiar with this idea? This is when something is banned, prohibited, not allowed, but we just sort of look the other way when people do it. So, like in a lot of other countries, because we're real good on other people's human rights problems, we'll say, well, this is a problem of impunity, right? I'll give you an example of impunity. It used to be when there was a domestic violence problem. The law said if you assault somebody, that's a crime, you're going to be arrested, you're going to have to face the system. But a lot of, quite honestly, cops and judges and prosecutors would be like, well, just take a walk around the block, cool off. The woman's sitting up here with a black eye, and they're saying, go cool off. Then that's when we started getting laws. So that was a system of impunity. It was illegal to do, but everybody just decided, well, we're going to handle it this way. Then a group of activists were like, absolutely, this is domestic violence. Somebody's getting arrested. And because we need to separate these people. So now we're dealing with meaningful consequence. And, hopefully, we used to have impunity when it came to DWI. We used to have impunity when it came to people violating Clean Air and Indoor Air Act. We just have got to enforce the law. And there's a lot of times we don't enforce laws when it comes to police excessive force. I mean, look at Breonna Taylor's case. Look at, think about those 5 guys who killed Tyree Nichols in Memphis. Weren't they acting like we did this, but we're never going to get caught? They're not stupid. They just, all history tells them that they're never going to have to answer for this. I don't know if that answers your question, but thank you for asking it.
Hi.
How you doing, Jerry?
I'm totally in agreement with the concern you've raised about police brutality, particularly in Minneapolis, but even more broadly. But I want to shift to a related topic.
Sure.
And one that is in your bailiwick, the problem of crime.
Oh, yeah.
And I think everybody would agree we have a lot more crime than we should have, typically in metropolitan areas. The particular concern I have, and I might be ill-informed, but the impression I get is that too often when it comes to sentencing or prosecuting, that there's almost a choice between lock them up or turn them loose on parole or let it go or whatever. And so that people, often young people, who kind of get on the bad track and do criminal behavior, either end up in jail where they're going to be trained to be criminals in essence, or they're going to be let loose where what they learn is, I can do it and get away with it. And my question is, do we have an adequate set of ways of responding to crime that would get people on a better track with their lives? Is our criminal justice system up to that task? Because it seems to me it's not doing it, but maybe I'm just don't understand.
No. Well, one thing I do want to tell you, Jerry, is that crime numbers have gone down dramatically recently, but only recently. I mean, 2022 was pretty bad. 2021 was pretty bad. 2020 was pretty bad. We still have a lot of issues when it comes to car thefts. Yeah. We still got a lot of issues when it comes to gun crimes. We still, and these are still serious issues. I mean, if I could wave my own magic wand, when it comes to juvenile stuff, what I would do is, you all have heard, have you ever heard of EJJ, Extended Juvenile Jurisdiction? It used to be that you were either adult or juvenile. Then we got a new system that says, well, look, you're going to get 2 sentences. You're going to get your juvenile sentence, but you're going to have an adult sentence that is suspended, hanging over your head. And if you act, and if you violate, then you're going to end up doing that adult sentence. That is the law now. It only goes up to 21. I think we should extend juvenile EJJ till 25, quite honestly. One of the problems is that if you commit a horrible crime at the age of 15, and 15-year-olds do commit horrible crimes sometimes, you either gotta adult certify them, or you basically are gonna keep them under EJJ until they're 21, and then they're basically free. And I don't think that's adequate to some of the more egregious crimes. What I would do is I'd do a lot more with truants. Keeping kids in school actually promotes public safety. Keeping them there. I'd extend after school programming. Another thing, that I would do is, and I'll tell you, we're doing this now at the AG's office. We're using consumer protection laws to fight crime. So we're suing Kia and Hyundai because they have refused to put engine immobilizers in their cars, and it makes them a lot easier to steal. So, for example, you think about Kia, 98% of all the cars on the road have engine immobilizers. It's actually pretty hard to steal your average car, but not if they're a Kia or Hyundai. You can go on YouTube and have a UBS course and learn how to steal a Kia or a Hyundai. They used to have a group called the Kia Boys, and all they did is hunt for Kias and stole them. And a lot of these high-speed chases that you see, with their Kias or Hyundais. And, they killed a 70-year-old Hmong elder, and they're always young, 12, 13, 14. Ask Chief O'Hara, he'll tell you. So we're suing these people and saying, you must put these engine immobilizers. It reminds me of the whole Pinto thing. Some folks of, more my age might remember Ralph Nader wrote a book called Unsafe at Any Speed, because Ford said, you know what, if we just put the tank here, we're going to save about $500 per unit. And after you sell enough units, that's a lot of money for us. Only the cars would blow up. So we're doing that. Another thing, we're suing Fleet Farm because they were negligently selling guns. You can legally sell a gun. I think we have grossly misinterpreted the Second Amendment. That's another conversation. But you can legally sell a gun, but Fleet Farm was negligently selling them and aided and abetted criminals who were trafficking guns, and some of them were used in murders. I don't know if you remember the whole incident in the truck park on West 7th, you know, where the Wild plays, right? Anybody go to the downtown St. Paul? You know, there's this place called the Truck Park, like across the street from some of the nice restaurants there. And a young girl, 26 years old, Markeisha Wiley, and she was a veterinary tech. Her job was to care for kittens and puppies. And she was out hanging out with friends one night, and these idiots start shooting at each other over Lord knows what, and she catches a bullet and dies. 14 other people got hit but did not die. Well, that gun was sold to those crooks, and I'm not saying they're evil, but they were definitely violating the law on that day. That gun came from a straw purchaser named Jerome Burton. And Jerome Burton went into the Fleet Farm, and he bought about 37 guns within like a few weeks. And even the people who worked at the Fleet Farm were like, you know, we think this cat's up to no good. And the managers were like, they got the money, they got the gun. Now they, and so what, these guys are straw purchaser. So a straw purchaser is somebody who has a clean record, buys guns and sells them to people who don't. And so we're suing, and we're like, okay, yeah, the shooter, he's going to prison. The straw purchaser's going to prison. But what about Fleet Farm? They just get to walk away from this? I'm telling you, there's a lot of, if people who have memberships in yacht clubs, golf clubs, and country clubs, some of them benefit from crime. Like the board of, like if you are a major shareholder in Kia Hyundai, you're making money off crime. You're making money, and if you own a Fleet Farm, until you tighten it up and make sure that you're selling the guns legally and properly, you're making money off crime. We also have been using the nuisance statute to tell businesses, you got to clean up what's going on this corner, or we're going to take enforcement action against you. I'm going to tell you, a lot of people were pissed off at me because I told Merwin Liquor and Winter Gas that I was going to shut them down unless they stopped that crime on that corner. Y'all heard about this? But once we fought, we served a notice of nuisance, and you haven't had a shooting on that corner since. Not one, not any, not none. And look, some people say, well, it spread. They're right. It did spread a little bit. But this issue of crime, we should all think about it, and it's not all about throwing people in prison all the time. We need to go upstream on some of these things. We need to have, we should do juvenile justice reform, but I don't think we should start with the worst offender. We should start with the lowest offender. Truants, shoplifters. Let's start there. If a kid who did not assault somebody but is caught with a gun, let's figure out, why are you carrying this gun? A lot of times you'll say, well, I'm scared of somebody. So, we could do a whole session on just this. But thank you very much. I'll make it quicker. Sorry, everybody.
Hi. Thank you for first in your presentation talking about how this is an issue that can't really be solved by training, and it's a culture issue.
Well, what I want to say about that is, what training did Derek Chauvin not receive?
Mm-hmm. And we have research, and we have plenty of case studies in how these training programs are for sure limited. So it seems to be a big culture issue. Yep. And I'm also really glad you brought up the issue of collective bargaining. I'm also pro-union.
Yep.
I believe everyone deserves the ability to be a part of a strong union. But I think something needs to be done about the police unions, like you said. So could you offer more about what could be done? I know it's hard to speak publicly
well,
about.
Let me just say that when the contract comes up, what would it mean? Forgive me, you guys. You got to forgive me about this. What would it mean if the humanists of Minnesota called the chief in and called the mayor in and said, that we know the contract's coming up. Here's what we expect. Here's what we want you to argue for. We want to pay the police well. We want to make sure they got good benefits. But in terms of them being unfireable, we're not sure that's a good idea. You know, I think that would be legit. You know, let me tell you, when the humanists speak, people in power listen. So don't leave your power on the table.
Hi.
Hey.
Other than being a fellow Michigander and questioning going to Big Boy rather than
What
Nassau
city?
Coney Island.
Oh yeah, that's a tough choice.
I know. Actually, I want to talk about something a little different. I voted for you many times, every race you've run. I also voted for Mary Moriarty. So I was disappointed you taking that case out of her hands, and the McKeever case, and I wonder if you could talk about that and how
Happy
you
to.
didn't take a recent case out of her hand. What was the difference between the two? Thank you.
Well, I'm going to be real transparent with y'all. The reason I didn't take the Braveheart case, and I did take the McKeever case, is because I was trying to send a message by taking the McKeever case. And the message is, murder's different. But I cannot take every case, every murder case coming through Hennepin County. So if she keeps doing it, at some point my hands get tied because I just can't. I mean, the murder cases that I do are basically for the smaller counties. The money the legislature gives me to prosecute serious crime is for Lake of the Woods County, Brown County, Morrison County, it's Carleton County. It's not for Hennepin, Ramsey, Washington, Dakota, Olmsted, St. Louis. Those bigger ones, they supposed to do those cases. Now look, Mary and I just so you guys know, me and Mary were law school student colleagues, and we've been very good friends the whole time. Our relationship did get strained over the McKeever case because I just can't. I mean, if somebody tells you you're going to get money if you stalk this person, send them violently threatening notes, follow them around for a week, kick in their house, shoot at them 9 times, hit them 5 with their child in the house. I'm sorry, as long as it's in my power, that person's not walking in 2 years. They're just not. And I'm willing to lose elections over it. Before the world knew about our difference of opinion, I pleaded with her on multiple occasions. And she correctly said, I was elected to do this, I'm doing it, and I'm doing it this way. And I said, well, I was elected too, and I'm going to the governor, and we're going to do it this way. And I don't mind if people are mad at me about this because I understand, you guys elected her. But when she said we're going to treat kids like kids, I did not think we were talking about heinous murders like this. And so we just had a difference of opinion. What I did was not illegal in any way. Minnesota statute 8.06 allows this to happen. It was not extra legal at all. But there is a resource limitation. So that's why I didn't. So you saw the judge in the Hussein Braveheart case say, I'm not accepting this. Does everybody know what I'm talking about? So there was a case where a teenager carjacked this guy. This guy was just a regular, ordinary guy. People loved him. He was a good, decent person. And I think his name was Steve Markey. And he was just driving, and he got carjacked by Hussein Braveheart and his friend. And Hussein Braveheart's friend is doing serious prison time because he's an adult. Braveheart, he goes, his case was in litigation for a while on appeal, but, he did this heinous murder, and the county attorney was going to give him juvenile time, which means he pretty much was going to avoid any adult consequence. And as much as I'll tell you right now, as much as I sympathize with the family and I agree with them, I ultimately had to tell them, I can't take every single case. I was hoping that Mary would get the clue that if I let the murderers go like this, then Ellison might take my case again. But I can't take all these cases. I just don't have the bandwidth. So I'm here to be open with you, bro. I mean, I'm telling you how it really is. But thank you for asking, because I do want people to know my decision making and hers.
Thank you very much for your talk, Keith. You said a lot, so a lot of what I think, and so I don't have to say too much. I want to say some of the things that you said and ask a question about it. Well, some people seem to blame the police on oppression, but I don't think that's right.
Blame police on what?
Blame the police for the oppression of
Okay,
black people,
gotcha.
especially.
Gotcha.
And because I think the precedent you said is a part of a systemic racism, and the police, they're a paramilitary organization, they obey orders. They know they're supposed to oppress black people. I mean, that's just the way it is. You explained that very well. And so the problem is, I think it seems like if we focus on just police reform and not pay attention to the mass incarceration, which is a part of basically the police are given a job to enforce mass incarceration, which puts in place the systemic racism, a large chunk of it, and especially including the war on drugs and all of that. So it seems to me, I just want to know if you think this is right, that if we just focus on police reform without taking care of mass incarceration and all that, it may not work so well because the police, they won't really get the idea they're not supposed to stop doing the oppressing.
Well, let me say that I think that I don't want to let any element off the hook. So I'm not willing to give anybody a pass. And if you look at the whole chain, we need to deal with all pieces of it, including the police. But I do agree with you, it's not only them. I mean, and like housing. What if the FHA, which segregated America in terms of residential segregation, just apologized for it and set up a commission to just tabulate what it meant? I tell you one thing it meant. It meant that if you were white, you could get a mortgage, you could get a VA, you can get a what do they call those things? A GI Bill education. You could get a VA loan, and you can get into a house. Which, if your grandfather bought it in 1950 for $5,000, it's probably worth $400,000 today. Which meant your family was homeowners in the 50s, and then your parents were homeowners, and then maybe you are now too. But if you're black, it meant you were a renter, which meant your family acquired no equity. You want to know the difference when we talk about black-white wealth disparity? A lot of it is tied up in the housing. And if anybody wants to know more about this, read a book by Richard Rothstein, Rothstein, or E-N or I-E or E-I, I'm not sure. And the name of the book is The Color of Law. And you could put it together with another book called Sundown Towns by, I can't remember the author's first name, but his last name was Lowen, Lowen, something like that. And you know, Edina was a sundown town. Did you know that? Edina was absolutely a sundown town. And there used to be a lot of people of color living in Edina. And then it was just like, y'all can't live here no more. Go to North Minneapolis. I'm not lying to you. It's what happened. And you can rent over there. And if we did, I think that it's not a, so like, here's the thing about letting the police, without having some level of accountability there. Martin Luther King was arrested 30 times. Was it by realtors? No. When John Lewis got smashed over the head because he was crossing the Eben Pettus Bridge, that was by the Alabama State Troopers, right? When y'all ever heard of a guy named Jimmy Lee Jackson? Jimmy Lee Jackson, when he was on a march in Marion, Alabama, got attacked, beat up, and then shot right in a diner unarmed. That's what started John Lewis and those guys marching from Selma to Montgomery, which led to the passage of the 1964 Voting Rights Act. And so what I'm saying is, I think it is a total cop-out to blame all of our problems on the police. That's not to say that some of them are not with the police. But then again, if you want to say all cops are bad, now that's wrong too. Because I know some wonderful cops, and without them, we could never have prosecuted Derek Chauvin. Richard Zimmerman, Madeira Arredondo, a lot of cops crossed the blue line and testified in this case, and without them, we could not possibly have won. And there's a lot of cops who want the change. So this whole idea about all the cops suck, that's not true either. And you're never going to solve the problem by just overgeneralizing that way. But we need some system change. I will tell you this, I am optimistic about Brian O'Hara. I think he's a good guy. I think he's a good chief. I think he's responsive. I think you should have him here and should ask him some questions and see where he's coming from. And I think you'll like it. And, and I'm going to tell you, Newark used to have some of the worst police brutality problems in the country. They cleaned them up. They're kind of a model. So you can fix this problem. I don't want anybody walking out here thinking, oh, this is a problem. Always been here, always going to be here. No, that's not true. We can fix this problem. But anyway, thank you very much, sir.
Well, thanks a lot.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, thanks for being here.
Oh, yeah.
What effect has the war on drugs had in discrimination against policing? And what I'm very hopeful with the decriminalization movements and other things that are happening, that some of that will change. And I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, the war on drugs just exploded incarceration, highly racialized. According to the CDC, black people and white people take dope at about the same rate. Black people don't take more dope than white people do. White people don't take more dope than black people do. It's about the same, And yet black people go to prison for drugs. There's whole states where no white person has ever been prosecuted for having crack. Never. And so what we would say, when I was a defense attorney, I'd say, drugs are legal in the white community. So I mean, there's a lot of books written on this subject. It was horrible, and even though we've begun reform, there's still a lot of those old laws are still there. And so we used to have this 100-to-1 disparity between crack and powder cocaine. So if you had one, you'd have to have 100 times more crack to get the same sentences you get for 1 ounce of powder. And 89% of the people smoke crack were black, and 89% of the people who snorted the cocaine were white. So it's kind of like, if you consume ice, well, you're going to jail. If you drink water, you're not. It's the same stuff. One's just cheaper and less potent, and you can guess which one. And so the war on drugs we still haven't recovered from it. I mean, in terms of asset forfeiture, time in prison, I do not smoke marijuana, nor do I recommend anybody else. But I'm very glad that we have recreational weed now, because we don't need to throw people in jail for this. I will tell you though, your teenagers smoking too much weed, it does sap their motivation, and I'm serious. We're now that we've gone ahead and legalized it, can we have the other conversation on how it's not awesome? It's not preferred. Legal doesn't mean like advised, you know what I mean? We need to do that. Right? I mean, particularly when it comes to traffic stuff like that. There's not alcohol. You can take a test and we can tell what your alcohol level, your blood concentration level is. Weed, you really can't do that. So, but you still could be impaired. But anyway, thank you for raising this. The war on drugs is not actually over. Now, we're not going through public housing projects with a front end loader like we used to do. Who remembers that? They sure were doing it. Now that we don't do that, but there's still a lot of stuff we're not, and we still have not yet to embrace, drugs as a medical healthcare issue. And we are making a lot of progress there. We really are, but we have a lot of ways to go. And then fentanyl. I'm real afraid that we're going to have an incarceral response to the fentanyl crisis as opposed to a healthcare response to the fentanyl crisis. We're this far from it, folks. A lot of conservatives in the state legislature would like to lock everybody up for fentanyl. And you're going to bring us right back to 1992. Thanks a lot. How you doing?
Good, good. Thank you for everything, and I'll take you up on switching topics if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem.
The passage that you chose to read was actually my favorite one from the book because it just highlights the intrinsic humanist values of the people that were there witnessing what was happening. I don't know if I can draw a parallel with this, but I would like to hear your thoughts on it because we talk about there's a talking point that you always hate to hear when something like this happens, like the few bad apples, like
Right.
Everyone rolls their eyes when something like this happens. But with things that happened October 7th, Middle East, Gaza, Palestine, the same way the bystanders didn't care who that person was, they just knew that they needed to do something, that what was happening was wrong. What can we do on our side of the political aisle to emphasize the human value of the people that are being affected either side? And what can you do from within? Because you talked about, if Chauvin would have been reprimanded or fired, things would have been different, obviously, and that was action from within. So your thoughts on what's happening and what can you do from within to steer the conversation from the few bad apples equivalent of like, oh, we stand with Israel or whatever, no matter what, which we do, but anyway, that's it.
Well, Felipe, I got an idea that people should do right away. Everybody should send Rashida Tlaib a letter of thanks and support. That she should get flooded with letters of appreciation. She never said anything anti-Semitic or hateful. And if somebody says from the river to the sea, they might mean something hateful, but that doesn't necessarily mean something hateful. I mean, I've walked down the streets of Hebron. If you're Palestinian, you can't walk down that street. I walked with these feet down that street, and me and my Israeli guide could go, but the Palestinians could not go. And then I walked to a place in Hebron called Kiryat Arba. And there I saw a shrine to someone named Baruch Goldstein, who was a doctor from New York, who machine gunned 39 Palestinians at prayer in the Ibrahimi Mosque. And they had a big, beautiful thing to him. And I'm going to tell you this. I've also been to Sderot, Ashkelon, and Ashdod, which are Israeli cities right around Gaza. And, those people do live in terror. How would, they do. They really, it is terrifying what they live through. What about trying to save everybody? Here's the thing. The longer the war goes on, the more likely it's going to expand. Hezbollah, Syria, the Houthis. I mean, I thought we were in a war in Ukraine. Are we not? Is that over already? Oh, okay. China would love to grab Taiwan, and there's always tension in the South China Sea. How many fights can we have at one time? So this is not a good thing for U.S. national interests. You want to get those 240 hostages out while the hostilities are going? It's extremely difficult to do. Number three, we've got, I don't know what the numbers are, but I hear that there's north of 10,000 dead now. I mean, how many are we willing to tolerate? I heard like something like 98% of the people who die in Gaza are civilians, nothing to do. So the people who were murdered in Israel, they did not order the blockade of Gaza. They didn't have nothing to do with that policy. They were partying at a concert. And the people who are dying in Gaza, they don't have nothing to do with Hamas's decision to do that. And yet, when the elephants fight, the grass gets trampled. And when I was in Gaza, and I'd been to Gaza 4 times, man, their ambulances were bashed down then. There were schools that were smashed down then. When you walk into Gaza, I noticed 2 things right off the bat. Number one is that you go from a first world in Israel with street lights and cars and electric vehicles into a place where half the vehicles are horse-drawn, and the other half are old cars. But it's not like Cuba where they're really well cared for. The other thing you see is that it's just like a sea of kids everywhere, little ones, big ones, climbing through the rubble from the last war. I remember being in a meeting with an Israeli general after my trip to Gaza. And I said to him, General, please, can the people have lentils and coriander? And he said, yeah, I'll think about it. And then I said, but they need concrete too, because they're sleeping outside. They got their houses are bashed. He said, no concrete, because they could use that to make a bunker. So I can't do that. You know, the tunnels. There is an amazing network of tunnels going from Gaza mostly into Egypt, but also some into Israel too. And they're controlled by the smugglers and stuff. But there are legitimate crossing areas like the Eretz crossing and a few others where legitimate goods can go in and out. But sometimes they say, you know what? We're going to close the crossings. Why? Because we are. Because we can. Turn off the water when Israel says so. Turn off the electricity when Israel says so. We should say, but I will say also this. I know a lot of people have directed their anger at Biden, and I think it is misplaced. Biden is urging a humanitarian pause. He's listened to his rhetoric. It has changed. It's gotten a lot more balanced. There's only one person who I figure really benefits from all this, and his name is Benjamin Netanyahu. Because Israelis were trying to protest his thing to mess up the courts, and he was under criminal prosecution for his own corruption. And now nobody's talking about that. There's no discussion of it at all. So I'll just say, I know you guys are humanists and all, but you have prayers, right? No? Can we have like affirmations or vibes? I don't know. Can we send good vibes and well wishes to the people of Israel and to Palestine, including Gaza and the West Bank? All the positive energy we can muster, send it to both, not one or the other. And I will say one last thing to you about this. The discussion of a Palestinian state has become passé. We got to put it back on the table. There is no other way. There simply is no other way. What is there? 7 million Israelis, 7.5, 8 million, and there's about the same number of Palestinians. Nobody's going anywhere. Egypt is not about to accept 2.5 million Palestinians to live in the Sinai. There's a reason nobody lives in the Sinai. It is a desert. So if you push them out of Gaza into the Sinai, they're going straight to Cairo. Anybody ever been to Cairo? It's jam-packed now, right? I mean, it's scary to cross the street in Cairo. You better take your life into your hands. I mean, it's already a very stuffed city as it is. They got to work it out, man. There's just no other way. So urge Biden to say we got to work it out. Let's put the statehood issue on the table. That's all I got to say.
I'm so sorry because we have a couple of people waiting, but our question time is over. Maybe you can
It's
chat
Felipe's
with,
fault. He asked
Keith
me a really deep question.
during the social, yeah. But thank you so much. Let's give another hand to Attorney General Ellison.
Do you want to talk one-on-one or something?
Well, you can go start signing books.
Oh, yeah, I better get to it.
They'll line up with the signing.